4K is regarded as the pinnacle of modern day gaming, whether it's on consoles, PCs, or even the upcoming streaming services from Stadia or GeForce Now. It is absolutely nothing new, but in 2019, deciding whether to commit to 4K is still a very big decision, and it's something a lot of people disagree about, because not only are you going to need a very expensive new TV or monitor, but to be able to actually drive all of these games at this resolution, you're going to need some really powerful hardware to boot. Starting at the beginning, the benefits of 4K resolution are actually really easy to understand, because as you'd expect, more pixels are always better. Well, from a quality perspective anyway, but more on that later. Rocking a resolution of 3840 by 2160, we have almost 4,000 lines of horizontal pixels for a total count that exceeds 8 million. This gives us jaw-dropping levels of visual detail that I really thought I would almost sort of get used to, but you can whack any AAA title up to this resolution, and it's really mind-blowing just how real these images can be. You often hear that 4K resolution is pointless, and on a small screen size you just can't notice a difference. But let me assure you that no matter what your take on whether it's worth it or not is, there's a clear difference between even Quad HD and UHD 4K that really has to be seen to be believed. But if this is the case, then why aren't all gamers gaming at 4K? And in particular, why am I not using one behind me? Well, unfortunately, it's almost a bit like buying an expensive car. There's just a lot more to think about than how it looks alone. 4K has definitely been coming along in great strengths over the last few years, but there's just too many stumbling blocks for most gamers to really access it. The PS4 Pro and Xbox One X definitely have helped quite a lot in this regard, and when you combine that with the cost of 4K TVs coming down sharply, it's actually almost easier to get into 4K gaming by buying a PS4 Pro or Xbox One X. But of course, the problem is, they sort of do 4K gaming. The Xbox One X is definitely the better option, as you're getting 4K 60fps in a fair few titles, but it's definitely not all of them, and some of them don't even render in 4K in the first place. They maybe use something like checkerboard to output 4K, but it's not always real 4K. The reason for all of this is purely down to the horsepower requirements of 4K resolution. You need some serious silicon to drive all of those pixels, and doing so while rendering all of these fancy shadows and reflections is really hard work. The fact of the matter is that even the RTX 2080 Ti, a GPU that cost over £1,000 alone, can't drive every single title at 4K 60fps, as some games are just too demanding. Take the game Control for instance. This is what I've been playing quite a lot in my bedroom recently, and even on that very GPU, you turn on the new ray tracing effects, and you actually struggle to get 1440p 60fps with all of the settings turned on. And this is something that is almost a little bit concerning maybe when you're spending such ridiculous amounts of money on all of your graphics horsepower, the whole setup, and it sort of goes to show that there's sort of no one-size-fits-all solution at the moment for 4K gaming. You're always going to be compromising somewhere. Don't get me wrong though, this situation is actually quite rare, and we're now actually seeing a fair few high refresh rate 4K panels that can not only supply all of the visuals that you've been dreaming of, but the fluidity as well. Asus, Acer and Philips all have screens that can fully take advantage of the huge amounts of graphics horsepower, with my most recent trip to IFA showing us the future of living room gaming. There aren't many games that will actually be able to run this fast without toning down some of the settings, but if you find something that does, you'll honestly be thunderstruck with just how sharp and fluid the game worlds become, and you'll lose yourself in something that really is truly magical. But all of this really won't come cheap though, as the screens alone for 4K 60fps will cost you at least £400–500, and when you're looking at something that can do high refresh rate, we're frankly getting into silly numbers. For the highest end gaming setup, you're probably looking over £3,000 when you factor in all of the different components, peripherals, parts, everything. And while this is no doubt going to produce something truly special, is it really worth this sort of money? Some may say yes, some may say no, but realistically when you factor in all of the costs, it really is pretty ridiculous. And the funny thing is that all of this is without talking about the latest buzzword, HDR, which is actually a lot more complicated to explain, as some of it is very good, some of it is terrible and not worth having. If you do want to learn a little bit more about HDR, then feel free to find my Is It Worth It video in the top right hand corner of the screen that will explain everything in great detail. But when you factor in 4K and HDR and you bring them together, we're talking even more money! Hooray! My £800 Samsung TV actually offers a fairly solid HDR experience. But on the monitor side, it really is only the G-Sync Ultimate displays that have currently convinced me in this technology. The problem is that these displays cost over £2,000 at RRP, so that £3,000 setup that we just talked about just gets even more expensive. What is happening? And the thing is, the main argument that people actually have against 4K isn't even the great expense to get all of this equipment. It's actually that you can get a better gaming experience without using it. Let me explain. Gaming is always about the feel, how smooth it is, how good is the gameplay, and are there any sudden jolts or maybe some artifacts that will pull you out of the experience. At a fixed 60 FPS lock, 4K is going to be better than QHD and 1080p hands down. But in reality, lowering the resolution increases frame rate. So you're not only going to be paying more money, but you're actively going to lose FPS to boot. So unless you're already at your display's maximum refresh rate limit, your game is actually going to be less responsive than it would be at that lower resolution. So at this point, it's probably all sounding a little bit doom and gloom. And realistically, there are a lot of downsides for going for 4K. However, there are still some very legitimate and very good reasons why you might want to go for 4K. In fact, I'm actually in the market for a new monitor for the new studio space, and I am actually strongly considering going for 4K. Realistically, it's all about what you are going to use your screen for, as after all, there are different apps and games, and they all need different sorts of displays. So if you're a console gamer, and you have a PS4 Pro, Xbox One X, or maybe you're watching this video in the future in a next generation console, then a 60Hz 4K screen actually makes quite a lot of sense, as you're probably going to be watching 4K movies, and all of the enhanced games are actually mastered for UHD screens anyway, be it via native rendering or some form of upscaling. If you're on the PC and you don't use a console, then it does get a little bit more tricky, as if you're watching a lot of YouTube and Netflix, maybe you play RTS and strategy games and a bit of odd cam or photography work, then all of these pixels are going to be put to great use. You just need to make sure that your system is powerful enough to drive all of them. If you primarily play FPS titles though, or maybe you're playing competitively with a mouse and keyboard, then 1440p or Quad HD is probably actually a much better bet for you. As it's not only far cheaper, but if you grab yourself a 144Hz or higher screen, you'll probably find that the extra smoothness is going to be far more useful for you, with increased reaction times paying dividends in the moments that really count. But realistically, I think the problem is that a lot of us will fall into camps that almost merge these things together, and thus there is no one single monitor that can do everything perfectly. I think I'm quite a good example of this, as I watch a lot of YouTube, and doing so on an ultrawide to me is a little bit off-putting because you have huge black bars on either side. I'm making 4K content, so I'd quite like to be able to actually see all of those pixels when I'm putting it out. I'm doing a lot of color accurate stuff, so I want to be able to see all of that, and thus a gaming display is not quite such a good idea. But then my job is actually quite a lot of gaming to it. I do a lot of games, it's what I like to do, right? And an ultra-wide monitor is great for productivity, it's great for gaming, it supports high refresh rate, it's easier to drive than 4K. Do you sort of see what I mean? You have all of these different factors playing against each other, and to be honest, I'm still undecided. I'll definitely keep you updated on what I end up going for. And if you do want to follow along for the journey, make sure you are subscribed to find the full moving vlogs and all of the choices that I pick up along the way. If you are in the market for some new monitors, I'll also leave some Amazon affiliate links down below with my favourite displays to help you make the right choice. In particular, I really love Acer's Nitro 4K 144Hz monitor that forgoes that ludicrously expensive HDR backlight in the favour of something that's just much more accessible. This means that you don't need to worry about losing an arm and a leg, as at just under £899, it's definitely still a little bit expensive, but it remains accessible, and it's very suitable for all types of gamer, productivity, and pretty much anything that you can throw at it. Let me know your thoughts on what your favourite monitor is, what are you using at the moment, what are you going to upgrade to, and if you could have any monitor in the world, which one would you go for? I'll also leave a poll card in the top right hand corner and I'll throw the question out to you guys. Is 4K worth it and would you buy one? Yes or no? I really hope this video has been useful for you though. If it has, please hit the like button. It really does help out so much and I'd really appreciate if you could do that. Don't forget to check out my HDR Is It Worth It video, which is hopefully just as useful for HDR. A massive thank you to you guys for watching and I'll see you in the next one.